You are listening to the North Carolina Food and Beverage Podcast. Thank you for downloading and subscribing. Coming to you virtually live from high atop the historic Raleigh building in beautiful downtown Raleigh. The NCF&B takes the listener behind the scenes to tell the stories of the people that contribute to the creation of the food and beverage community of North Carolina. And now, the misfits in the dish pit, the faces of the front. They are Max Trujillo and Matthew Weiss.
Hello, and thank you for listening to the North Carolina Food and Beverage Podcast. I am your co-host, Max Trujillo.
And I am your co-host, Matthew Weiss, and today we have a very special guest. He is the only American to ever win the Meilleur Ouvrier de France Diplôme d'Honneur, basically a best craftsman of France. He is none other than Chef David Burke. Welcome, Chef.
Hey, thank you. You did a good job pronouncing that.
Thank you. I worked on it.
Yeah.
I don't even know what he just said, but that's fine.
Oh, the MOF. That's the
MOS. I should have just went with that.
So, Chef Burke, as I was just casually having a conversation with some friends about who was going to be on the show coming up, I said, oh yeah, Chef David Burke is going to be on. And our good buddy, Bobby McFarland, who's a chef out here, he just stopped and he looked over and went, wait, what? Who? What? You're going to have Chef Burke on? I said, yeah. He's like, dude, he's amazing. Now, Bobby cooked in New York for Floyd Cardo's back in the day and had, kind of had some experience back there. So he informed me as a local upstart chef, like, you're going to have a legend on, man. And so you have huge shoes to fill now based off of what Bobby said.
Well, thank you, Bobby.
Well, Chef, let's get into why you're joining us today. Just get right into the meat of the things. You have restaurants all around the country. Your accomplishments are many. 2 times James Beard nominee and award winner, cookbooks, all types of peaks and valleys of your career, worked with some of the best chefs, trained some of the best chefs. But now you're getting into North Carolina and you're going into the Meridian Hotel in Charlotte with two venues there. So what's it going to be and why are you moving into that space?
We're excited to be in Charlotte, and we've been looking at Charlotte for a while. I have relatives on Lake Norman. My business manager lives down there. He's been involved in managing athletes, mainly NASCAR, for a long time. He came out of Chicago, where he was doing Mike Ditka and a couple others. So I've been going down there, and he kept telling me, you got to get down there. We looked at a few places 15 years ago, 12, 10. This never kind of, it never felt right. And then we came upon this opportunity, and we're like, this is the right time. This is the right time because we had an opportunity to do a big project, which is a rooftop bar, which is open, called the Cloud Bar in the Meridian Hotel, and the Red Salt restaurant should open and be safe to say on the 20th of September. So I'll be back in town on the 14th to practice that, finishing up the final redesign work. And you know what? I think Charlotte is a really wonderful city. Food's good. The scene's good. The mixology is good. And we're happy to be part of it. It's easy to keep an eye on it for us. It's not flying to the West Coast or going to Vegas. And we think, up and down the East Coast is more of what we'd like to focus on it anyway. And I think Charlotte's got a lot of people that are interested in a New York City or our brand and our style of food.
Yeah. Yeah, we were talking right before the show started, just a quick introduction. I mentioned that I had some history with working with Wolfgang Puck. I worked there for about 5 years in Los Angeles, and he himself is obviously a notable chef, probably one of the most notable, but has opened restaurants all over the country, the world. That's got to be a quite a task to open restaurants, especially when they're out of your state, when you can't keep eyes on them at all times. But how does that feel as a chef with, I think when I look at your resume, I think it's about 17 restaurants that you may be attached to. How do you manage that?
Right. That's right. We're attached to 70. We own some, we manage some, we consulted some. It's it's about the people. You got to hire good people. You got to find. You got to weed through the management, and the culinary team is easier for me to find and put together based on my history, and people that want to learn we attract. And then we got to go out and find a great GM, and our corporate team is pretty strong. And it takes a lot to open a place. I mean, people forget the restaurant business. Number one is hard. Opening a restaurant is very difficult. You open a couple in a year or two, it becomes. It's very daunting because what could go wrong? There's so many things that can go wrong, and some of them are definitely going to go wrong. Because you're dealing with construction, timing, this and that and the other. Now we have COVID on top of this, so our numbers are we don't really know how to budget, so we're just going to open and see what happens. Because we have to get open. We have to start moving. We got, we have a timeline on stuff, and we have to get open. I think that the good news is with Charlotte, we've been eating out, even though New York's been closed, and so is Jersey. Finally, Jersey, this Friday, we got 25% indoors, and we have 5 restaurants in New Jersey. New York will be closed until at least January, which is very sad, but that's another story. I drive to Charlotte. I've been driving 9 hours, like power driving, the last 3 or 4 visits. It's kind of fun, but I can't do it alone. So I'm always trying to get people to drive with me. It's like, hey, you want to take a road trip? So
hey, ask my friend Bobby. I'm sure he'd love to.
That's right. He'd spend 9 hours with you.
You just go and you get it done. And so we've been eating out in town. And the price point is good. We've had some pretty good meals here and there. And, again, it's COVID. There's a lot of, but I think there's going to be a lot of interest and a lot of demand for what we try to do. And we're happy to be there. It's clean. It's a sophisticated city. It's new. And I think there's an appetite for value and well-crafted menus, so we're happy.
Yeah, I think Charlotte, for like a well-known restaurateur as yourself, is a great move business-wise, but also strategically. I mean, in Charlotte, and we talk about Charlotte, we're based out of Raleigh, but we cover the whole state. We have great friends like Chris Coleman and Matthew Krenz and all these really high-craft chefs that are working there. But the beauty about Charlotte, especially for a restaurateur as yourself and a chef as yourself, is you do have a lot of banking coming and commerce coming to that city. So you have that, but also, as we talk about all the time in North Carolina, what's amazing is you have this beautiful bounty of agriculture
right
a few miles from the city, from this what they call uptown in Charlotte, which is really downtown. I still never get that, but
that's so confusing.
Yeah, but it's the same.
It's really down, I know.
We're uptown and downtown, but and also, I mean, what a perfect place, because I had the opportunity to stay in that hotel a couple of years back because I was in Charlotte on business, and I remember going up to the Sky Club, and it's this beautiful thing. You look out over Charlotte. There's a pool up there, and they have bar service, but really, it's like it felt very hotel corporate and not very craft, I'll say. So I'm excited to see what kind of touch you're going to bring to that. And so, speaking about touch and technical stuff, you're famous for patenting your Himalayan sea salt dry aging technique. What is that?
Well,
how do we do it?
You can do it. You got to have some pink Himalayan salt bricks or clusters. But years ago, I started working with, my career started in very fancy restaurants like River Cafe in Europe and all that stuff, the River Cafe in Brooklyn, and worked for Daniel Boulud at the Plaza Athénée and some other French restaurants. And then I opened a place called Park Avenue Cafe on 63rd and Park with the founders of Smith & Walensky. And so obviously they were a steakhouse company, and we did a modern American restaurant similar to what Union Square Cafe was. Very successful restaurant, big one too. And so I started to get into the meat game a little bit. And they wanted me to open a steakhouse with them called Maloney and Porcelli that still existed. And,
right next to the aforementioned New York Palace Hotel.
That's correct. And then I got a whole story about the pork shank on that menu, but we'll stick with the beef. So I started to age beef. Got it, and as a fine dining chef, we looked at steakhouses as, steakhouse wasn't for us. It was a big hunk of meat with a baked potato and broccoli and hollandaise back in the day. So we took it, turned it on its head a little bit, hired a pastry chef, got creative, brought in different, but we aged our meat. Now, in aging our beef, traditionally it was 28, 30 days, blah, blah, blah. So we came up with a technique by accident, completely by accident. I'm very clever, but I'm not that clever. And I'm not a scientist. So what happened was I had invented a diet product that was a flavor spray. And it was basically flavored water that had strawberry shortcake flavor, bacon, butter, blue cheese, you name it. All that fatty stuff that you like, you spray on stuff. Like I could spray butter and Parmesan on pasta and have a cow-free, carb-free, diabetic-friendly product. So I wanted to develop dry-aged flavor in water. I wanted that, bring it to the flavor houses, one of the factories or one of the companies that makes perfumes in New Jersey. That's why Jersey smells. Perfume doesn't smell good when they make it. It only smells good after they make it.
That's why. Now we know.
So this is food perfume, the natural flavor companies. I gave the dry-aged hunk of meat to one of my food scientists. He analyzed it, came back with, he said to me, he goes, it's the most complex thing I ever analyzed. There's 370 flavor molecules, compounds, amino acids, enzymes, you name it, right? And I'm like, holy shit,
Yeah.
He goes, and it didn't even taste that good. I'm like, it doesn't really taste that dry. But he goes, well, you got raw meat, you got bone, you got dry-aged fat, you got fresh fat, you got blood. And then it goes on and on and on. Sugar. And he goes, but interestingly enough, the number one flavor in that dry-aged meat was cardboard. Because you have cardboard, your customers are eating cardboard, or at least smell the aroma of it. And I was like, I'll be damned. So I went back to the walk-in, and I looked at it, and there was cardboard on the floor because of the dripping. You can't mop a dry-aged room because it's got to be dry.
Yeah.
So then I said to myself, if cardboard's being absorbed, how about Himalayan salt or horseradish or something like that? So my thick steak not only gets seasoned minimally in the center, but it also gave it a longer shelf life. So that's basically how the idea was born. At least the idea was born. Then we perfected it. We got a U.S. patent on it. I was working with Steve Hansen from Be Our Guest. I don't know if you know who he is.
Of course.
Oh, yeah.
Fanatically a great restaurateur, but a fanatic in systems and data. And so we had to test it. He's like, there's no way I believe it. He doesn't believe me. He's not going to spend money building a walk-in in our number one Chicago steakhouse if we didn't do dates. So we did 3 months worth of tests, 30 days each, in a reach-in, one with salt, one without, 2 brand new reach-ins. And every time the one with the salt, we had 20 people testing. We went from 16 out of 20 preferred the salt one, 18 out of 20 preferred the salt one, and then another one was like 15. So clearly, the salt blind tasting made a difference. We ate unseasoned steaks. So then we applied for a patent, and we got it. Proud to have it. It's a great creation, and that's why we wanted the best steak, so we can control. That was before you even heard of people aging beyond 30 days.
Yeah.
Now you got 100-day dry aged steaks. The sweet spot for dry aging a good piece of meat is 55 days for a fatty cut like a ribeye, and probably 40 days on the sirloin. When you go beyond that, in my opinion, the guy with the patent, I think you're destroying the mouthfeel, and you're just going after funk, which is okay because some people like that. I mean, and you get 75-day a piece of meat. It's going to be blue cheesy and funky, but you're going to mess with you're going to start popping the fat capsules inside. But that's anyway. That's the patent.
So basically, the idea is, instead of the cardboard, you take out the cardboard and you just put salt. You put the.
I built a salt wall in the walk-in, or just put salt bricks on a rack in there. You obviously can't put glue or anything. The salt purifies the air, makes it
awesome.
You got salt air. You got high-powered fans in an aging buck. So you're blowing salt air basically through the cells of the beef.
Gotcha.
Once the scab part, the dry-aged part, goes on the meat, it starts to slow up. But for the first 10, 12 days, the meat is evaporating moisture, which is blood and water, and it's absorbing salty air. And the salt's a preservative. So the bacteria count in a regular box without salt is 1,000 times higher than my technique. So some people don't feel well when their body's not used to a dry-aged steak that's not properly dry-aged can have enough bacteria where you can get diarrhea or maybe not feel that well. So from a health standpoint, it's much better. But we don't we don't think anyone wants to hear that at the table.
Right.
You know,
when you're eating you're sharing a big porterhouse, you're not thinking about your health. Wait, so I have a question though. Does anybody really, especially from the business side of things, because when I told you before that I used to be the wine director at BLT Prime in New York, and at that time when that was still open, we had a dry aging room. But like within a year of me working there, we actually took out the dry aging room and put in a private dining room because business-wide that made a lot more sense. But also all the food purveyors, all the meat purveyors were starting to do their own dry aging, and it was kind of just as good. So is anybody doing in-house dry aging anywhere anymore?
Smith & Wollensky does. Real estate's so expensive in New York, so it's hard to do it.
Well, no, I know in New York, but like, would you do it in Charlotte where it's not quite as expensive?
I'll eventually grow into that in Charlotte. Right now, because we got to get open, we're not doing it. But I have my patented technique is Allen Brothers in Chicago built a salt room for me. So they age under my specifications. And the other reason we don't dry age in-house is because the labor. You got to hire, you need a $70,000 butcher. You need this, you need that.
Yeah.
And then it's waste. So you can buy it from the meat shop, the purveyors, laser cut. You know, you get what you want. You get only the center cuts. You know, you pay. So you got consistency across the board. You know, when we went up to Connecticut, we opened a couple of places. You know, not every city has great butchers. You know, so
I'm just, what I take from that whole story more than anything was I'm fascinated at how the cardboard integrated so deeply into the flavor, meaning that just anything in the room, the fact that you got these nerds over there, these food scientists, to figure this out, and then you were able to figure out what they meant by that. I love that whole idea, and it really lets you understand how organic the whole process is, and anything that you impart is going to go into the food, which then goes into your body. So you should be really conscious of what you're doing at all times. Like that's how when we're making wine or we're making beer and you're letting something ferment and age, if anything is not supposed to be there, it's going to be a part of the flavor profile. So you should be really, really keen on that. Thinking of good flavor profiles, though, I want to take a quick moment to talk about Hungry Harvest. Save a trip to the store, get fresh farm produce, kitchen staples, and pantry items delivered right to your doorstep starting at just $15.
Yeah, and Hungry Harvest, they'll curate weekly variety boxes of healthy produce. They pack them up in their facility, which is right here in the Triangle, and they make no-contact deliveries directly to your door with a team of local drivers.
Yeah, with conventional and organic options as well as 3 harvest sizes to choose from, it's easy to find the right fit for you.
And not only is it affordable and convenient way to keep yourself stocked up on healthy foods during this quarantine, global pandemic, etc., but it's also a great way to make a difference with your grocery dollars, because every time you receive a harvest, you're contributing to the fight against food waste and hunger in our community.
Yeah, every delivery saves at least 10 pounds of food from going to waste and supports the work of local hunger-solving organizations such as the Interfaith Food Shuttle with produce donations.
So to get a Hungry Harvest box, make sure you go to hungryharvest.net and don't forget to use the NCFB30 promo code and you will receive 30% off, which is already a great deal, but then 30% more on that. And also, the fact that Chef Burke, you're coming to North Carolina, one of the things you'll need to start reading is the Folks Foundation Journal.
That's right. The Folks Journal, because it is part of the Folks Foundation, folksfoundation.org, is a local group. Now, this is something that might be near and dear to you, Chef. Folks Foundation highlights they are champions of all good things crafted in North Carolina and the folks that make them. So they're talking about whether it's a chef or it's a farmer or it's an artist, a musician, a podcaster perhaps. We're all just trying to create, and they highlight that by enriching them through their 501c3 nonprofit. They have grants. They promote businesses. Recently, they just did the Carolina Quarantine Project, where Carolina-based musicians would showcase songs they wrote while sheltered in place. They actually turned that into a vinyl album, and it is on sale at their website, folksfoundation.org. So to learn more and find out more, read the journal online, or just check them out at folksfoundation.org. Be sure to consider a small donation to help support North Carolina makers. Again, the Folks Foundation, champions of all good things crafted in North Carolina and the folks that make them. And we are back. And so Yeah, so we've got into a little bit. I know Matt he's smiling every time he hears that New York drawl. I think it just makes him feel like he's back home a little bit. I do like knowing that the two of you guys, it's like we used to always make the funny, the joke is like, how do you know someone's from New York? Well, it's because they'll tell you the second you meet them. But there's a pride from New York, and there's a pride about the culinary industry from there too. I'd love to know. You've mentioned like some of the chefs that you've worked out there too, but just like kind of starting in New York and working your way out to you and trying to understand your style. Well, how do you look at yourself as far as a chef? You're a New York chef. What's the style of a New York chef? What is that?
The style, New York chef 40 years ago was different from a New York chef now. And when I came to New York in 85 or 84, and worked in the restaurants there, it was mainly French food. All the good restaurants were French. And you had to get your stripes by working as a saucier in one of those or sous chef eventually. You had a couple of good American restaurants. You had the River Cafe where I landed. You had the Four Seasons. You had the 21 Club. And then you had a Gotham Bar and Grill came a little bit later, like 86, 80. And those are the beginning. And the Water Club was part of there weren't a lot of respected ethnic restaurants and or modern American, which is a spin-off of what European life. And most of the good chefs are coming out of La Côte Basque, Lutèce, Le Cirque, and all that stuff. And those are the guys that I was working next to, So back then, we were pumping out of the Culinary Institute of America, learning from European chefs, and then finding Larry Forgione was at the River. He had a lot of California influence, and it was the beginning of something that we know now today as modern American food. The respect level went very high for chefs quickly that were really good, but you got your accolades through your peers because there was no Instagram. There was no, a New York Times and a Gourmet Mag and a New York Magazine review back then was worth a lot, and you worked for it. And then the word of mouth was very important, and you didn't burn bridges. You went from one chef to another, learn, and you had to ask a chef to get you a job. So the world's changed that way, and now and also the fact that chefs are getting a lot of respect through the years. When in the 70s it wasn't even a profession. 1977, the chef became a profession. Before that, it was a utility job, like a janitor or a maid. It was a food service. It was a service job. So that we've come a long way, and happily, and I'm glad I'm part of that. But being a chef in New York City, you have to work very hard, and you have to be very good to last in an environment where the competition level is that intense. And I'm sure it's the same for actors, and I'm sure it's the same for artists and anybody else in the craft field in New York City and other cities as well. But the competition keeps you going, and the opportunity to learn from the best is at your fingertips.
Yeah.
You're in the soup, man. You're there, and even the guy next to you on the line on your 18th hour is teaching you something that he learned at John George 2 weeks ago. I hear, and then you wind up. We were in Brooklyn across the river, so we were like the bad boys of Brooklyn because we were the wharf rats. We were the rough and tumble compared to some of the Park Ave crowd.
Yeah.
And we were the American guys. We were all, we weren't we weren't coming at it, and Charlie Palmer was the chef I worked for. And then I wound up taking over for him after I moved to France for pastry school, blah, blah, blah. And then, but I'd say the food, the innovation, and the experimentation that New York City allows a young chef to do is important, because some of the things we did, the lack of fear of failure is another big thing. You couldn't pull off in another city because it wouldn't be accepted. They wouldn't let you, you wouldn't be able to sell sweetbreads with this and that. Or, you'd be making it and it wouldn't move. See, when we were at the River Cafe with the amount of tourists from Japan in the 80s, we could sell anything. So we got to play. We got to and I compare it to musicians a lot. We got to play any song we wanted and it sold. And we got to record what we wanted and play around and rewrite it and redo it and remaster the whole thing until we got a menu that was right. And so it was a great opportunity for me to be at the River Cafe. And then as time goes on, as in the chef world, it's all about creativity and food. And then you get a little older, obviously, it's got to be about business too. You got to be able to make money. Yeah. You got to design places. You got to be ahead of the curve when it comes to style. And, we've been able to do that.
Yeah. That's, I'm glad you brought up that point. And just to be 100% factual here, Max, and, Max is from California, so sometimes the regional specifics get lost. But Chef Burke is at heart a Jersey guy. I know you made your bones in New York, but there's a little differences, But
oh, come on. Like Jersey to New York is like saying you're from the Valley or you're in Hollywood. Come on. It's the same thing.
No, but that's like telling somebody from the south of France versus somebody from Paris, like, oh, you're French, so it's all the same.
Yeah, but as an American, we're dumb enough to just make I'm generalization. So who cares?
I was born in Brooklyn, raised in Jersey, moved back to Brooklyn.
Oh, see?
So I think that I'm a real. I guess I'm a New York Jersey guy. Yeah. My accent is Jersey.
It's Jersey. That's what I was getting at. Jersey for sure.
I do want to kind of jump in. You were making this parallel to like musicians or actors or whatever, and it makes me think about kind of something that's happening right now. I'm thinking about like awards and award ceremonies, and this year, we've been thinking it's almost a tone-deaf year when it comes to celebrating someone for their achievements that happened, say, the previous year. And I'm kind of specifically thinking about the recent change that the James Beard Awards had done. They had gone through, selected all their winners. They actually even notified all their winners about the James Beard Awards, and then kind of thought maybe this is not the right time to give out awards, and so they opted to just take the year off. I wonder, I have my own opinions, and we can get into that, but I wonder what your opinions are of that decision and how you feel about what they did in that situation.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that they had selected winners. I did read something that they weren't gonna go forward due to the lack of diversity in the winner pool. I had read that, but I didn't know that they had chosen them or the lack of nominees. Or that was being one of the reasons, and the other reason I don't know what it was because I read while I'm driving.
The nominee, just so you know, like the nominee list, which is usually it's like the biggest filter, and then they filter it down to the semifinalist list. Those were all announced, and then they basically didn't do the
actual winner. They did
the actual winners would have been done at the ceremony anyway, or whatever. It would have been done virtually this year. Right. I don't, I'd have to look at it, but I don't. I think it's not fair to some of the people that were nominated and made that worked so hard to get there, because next year's a different year and there'll be another crop. But again, the awards things, whether they're for food or chefs and winemakers and cookbook writers, as well as movie stars or athletes, they're all kind of changing their a little bit as to, is it really the best of the best, or is it something else these days?
Right. I mean, is it a great PR agent that put themselves in front of the...
Right. Or the people that listen, the people are voting, or is it, well, we can't do the best because the best aren't diverse enough, so let's change the format a little bit. If the best are truly all these, this and that, and all of a sudden, well, we got to make sure we round it out, then it shouldn't be called the best. It should be called the
most popular.
Well, not necessarily that. It still be the best, but our picks, the greatest picks for this year, whatever it is. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, but it does matter to the the person in that arena fighting for it that get it because there was too many of one type of person and lack of this. So it gets a little tricky. I think the beard organization has gone through a lot of stuff and they do a great job. But again, any type of award ceremonies is always going to be someone that isn't happy.
Well, I guess it kind of begs the question too, and maybe this is another way to say it, is how important are awards then? Like in the whole scheme of things, I'll go first on this one. I actually think that awards in all these categories are somewhat important. I think they're a timestamp of what's happening in the world today. There's recognition. They're also, when you when you do put someone in that kind of award position or nominee position, you're kind of letting the rest of the world that doesn't pay attention to that industry, whatever it might be, you're letting everyone know, like, hey, this is the frame of reference we should be kind of focusing on. These people have their finger on the pulse of the zeitgeist of this of society. So, like, this is for reference point, and also to encourage. I think it creates a North Star for those that are just starting in the business, and they can look forward to the winners. And so, for a lack thereof, what does the lack of an award show bring to the community? Does it matter? I mean, Matt, do you have an opinion on that?
Well, I'll say I think, again, this is like regionally specific, because from what I remember, and Chef, you said this earlier, in New York, it's funny. Like, you knew about the James Beard Awards. It was important, but it wasn't the end all be all. But outside of New York, especially in North Carolina, and obviously now being that Ashley Christensen from North Carolina won Outstanding Chef of the is the reigning Outstanding Chef of the Year nationally, it's a big deal here. But
that's great. Yeah. Where is that? Is that for this year or last year?
That was last year. She was the 2019 Chef of the Year.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, but when you're in New York, I think there's so much of competition between your peers, and also, like you said, what made the difference back in the day, if you got a 3 to 4 star review by the New York Times, that was the biggest deal that you could achieve. That was validation, and so regionally, I think it makes a difference. And it's like, where do you have Michelin star awards? So if you get a Michelin star, but then you don't get a James Beard nominee, like, does that matter to you?
There you go. You're going to have some of the restaurants have 2 stars in the New York Times out of 4, and they got 3 Michelin stars, which is the best in the world.
Yeah.
So there's a difference in opinion, obviously, on writing. Subjective. It's always that way. Like I said, it's, the sign of success is when you're full every night.
Yep.
The awards, to answer your question, the award is a stamp of approval. It's it helps advertise. So and so is a James Beard Award winning chef. He's going to be opening a restaurant, so it's a PR thing. It's a merit. It's a badge, man, and it is good. Most chefs work really hard, and anybody that gets any recognition deserves it, because it's a hard profession. So if you do get recognition, congratulations. Whether it's this, that, or the other. But I look at people, chefs that have been in business for 20 years, or even a guy who has his restaurant in the suburbs and has been at it. Those are the heroes.
Yeah.
The guys that the people that can stay in business in the location and put out consistently good food on a daily basis, year in and year out. And there's also that whole celebrity chef thing where like I said, marketing, PR, Instagramming, and promoting yourself is easier than it was years ago. Years ago, the papers, the print magazines, they held a lot of weight because that's all you had. Now with Instagram and bloggers and influencers and all that, and you can create your own Instagrams and you can tell the world how great you are. Hey, look how great my ice cream sundae with 9 scoops of ice cream is, and I can balance it on roller skates, and here I am, and all of a sudden people like, and all of a sudden it's a fleeting postcard of an idea, but it leaves an imprint on you. And the fine dining chefs some of the websites are very good, and some of the Instagram. My son has a social media company, represents many of the New York City's best chefs, and I was hesitant. And the BLT guys, when I was with them, they were like, nah, we don't have to do that. It's a sign of weakness, which is crazy when you advertise. And restaurateurs, I'm sold on social media because my son converted me, and I kind of like it myself because it tells a story. But years ago, when I worked for Park Avenue Cafe, Alan Stillman, who created TGI Fridays, and Smith Walensky, he wanted to advertise Park Avenue Cafe, and I was like, I don't want to advertise. None of the other great restaurants advertise. None of the other great chefs are. It makes it look like we're running a coupon.
Yeah.
And he looked at me and he said to me, and I'll never forget it. He goes, "Do you think Tiffany's and Mercedes is going out of business?" Period. He shut me up. He goes, "They advertise." You think music, modern art's going out of business? They advertise. And I was like, you got a point. Can't argue with that guy.
Yeah.
He was one of those best guys I ever worked with.
Yeah, because you were worried about, my friend Charlie Palmer is going to look at me.
About my ego.
Like,
worried about my ego.
Yeah.
Worried about
like, oh. He needs to take an ad out in the paper. Yeah, his food can't stand alone.
Do you know what the ad was? I got to tell you. So we couldn't figure out an ad, so they put me in a straitjacket with a chef coat, and the line was, "There's a fine line between madness and genius." That was the ad.
That's good.
That's good.
We were doing some wacky food. Yeah,
that's really good.
Well, how does the ego? Like remain when you're doing? You know, you're no stranger to little television as well. You did Top Chef Masters. I believe you did 2 seasons, season 2 and season 5. You were around a bunch of heavies like during that time. How did that? What was that like as far as the camaraderie and also just the competition? How'd that feel?
Well, I'll start with the camaraderie. There's nothing like camaraderie among chefs. And I don't know if you have that amongst doctors. Maybe you have it amongst athletes and musicians, perhaps.
Sure.
But the chef world, because of the hospitality gene and the fact that we serve people food, we show, and we're all show-offs to a certain degree. I mean, we're craftsmen. I mean, if you're a carpenter, you can't like bring a cabinet over to your friend's house, right? But you could. But if someone comes to our restaurant, we're like this. Oh, good. I get to cook for Wolfgang Puck. It's like an honor that he chose your restaurant in New York out of so many. So we take that as a compliment that someone even came to your restaurant in New York that's a well-known chef out of the hundreds of choices.
Yeah.
So the camaraderie is good. And also, we get to meet each other through the different charitable things and like the Beard Awards and this and that. So that's an interesting thing. What was the second part of your question?
Which is the competition. The competition. How'd that feel?
Honestly, the competition. Season 5, there was a couple people that used to work for me that I was competing with, which I think, so I was like a little on the older side. So a couple of these guys worked for me as cooks, and they're like, "Oh no," and I'm like, "Oh yeah," and then so we had a lot of fun. And I got to be honest with you, I love it. I love competing. I don't care if I win or lose. I mean, it's always nice to win. Don't get me wrong. But just to be part of it, it takes a lot of guts for any chef with a brand or a name to get out there and put it on the line. And honestly, Top Chef Masters, they did a good job with keeping it real. And what you see is what you get. You got to hustle, man. You had to move. I mean, and it depends on how ambitious you are with your dishes. We wanted to make winning dishes, so it was for a guy like me. And I didn't cook. I haven't been cooking consistently over the last 10, 12, 15 years. It's not like I'm on the line every day.
Yeah.
So some of these guys still were like Voltaggio and some of these other younger guys, really talented, super smart, disciplined, and they know how to play the game. So it was really good to be with everybody, and the production house, Bravo, whatever it was, they did a really good job with fairly doing it. I thought,
Yeah, I think that's such. In this day and age of celebrity chefs and watching things, like what's better than to be able to watch people do their craft? Like imagine, it happens that you get to watch, like you said, a musician write a song and the whole creative process there. That's pretty awesome.
So I was going to ask you though, so not everything's always, not everything's hanging out with the badasses and being on TV and doing the promotions and opening restaurants. Sometimes there's the dirty underbelly, the grittiness of this business. We've talked about it a lot, especially this year, and even towards the end of last year with a lot of, we've had a Me Too movement, we've had Black Lives Matter, we've had a lot of social disconnect when it comes to the restaurant industry as a whole. And without going into like a lot of gossipy things about career, let's at least say you've had a tumultuous history in the restaurant industry. Like there have been a lot of just things that have kind of gone through, and you're from the old school. I'm from the old school as well. And I know that being in the business, it has changed so drastically. How does this restaurant industry feel for you, kind of like opening a brand new place now and understanding the format of which it how it has run and how it possibly should run in the future? Have you made specific conscious decisions about how a restaurant is going to be set up today based on the history of the industry?
It's very interesting because when I started, there was lots of yelling, and there was a lot of it's like parenting. Parenting has changed as well as running kitchens. By generation to generation, you take a little bit of what you learn and say, well, this isn't acceptable anymore. Beating your kid isn't acceptable anymore. Screaming at the cook and calling them names not acceptable anymore. There still is a sense of coaching with an enthusiastic and nervous energy thing that each kitchen, in my opinion, needs. Yeah. All right, for myself, I love the energy of a kitchen when it's show time and it's like a Broadway show and it's moving and you're yelling as a positive coach. You're not yelling. You're yelling like a coach on a football. Some coaches yell and some don't, right? Bobby Knight yells and throws chairs and this and that, won the most games ever, right? And then Bill Belichick, he doesn't say 2 words, and he's won a ton of games. So there's different methods of coaching now, and there's different methods of chefs. As far as the Black Lives Matter and the Me Too movement, never had an issue in any of my restaurants in regard to either one of those because of the diversity in New York, probably, and the fact that people come into New York and they know they're there as students. They're going to work for a guy like me for a year or 9 months, and they're there to learn. And they get mostly, I always treated women with more respect and helped them because I wanted women in my kitchen to break up the macho stuff. And I always saw women have palates, and they were not afraid to bring up an idea to me more so than guys. Women would be like, hey, we can try this, or have you ever made this Indian blah, blah, blah? And I'd be like, no, but I would be willing to try it, or here's something, And I always thought that was part of it. And we kind of took care of that because it's very physical too. And, it's physical. And, again, I went to college. It was 2 women out of 20 in my class. Right. So there weren't going to be a lot of female chefs. They weren't training. Right. So that was 40 years ago. 40 years ago. Now you look at the CIA, there's 52% women. Right. Yeah. Not 10. So it's come a long way. So maybe in 10 or 20 years, that process, you'll see half as many women in kitchen as men. I don't know. I still don't see that many in the average kitchens in general. So I don't know where they all go. And I know one thing. I've never paid a woman less than a man. That's good. And never even thought of it that way. I like it would make it. I just pay everybody as little as possible.
I think Max, you bring up an interesting thing because I think this is like for you, but for us, you are an old school chef. I'm sure at River Cafe when you were working there, Charlie Palmer, when he was your boss, probably chewed your ass out a couple times. And nowadays, you really can't do that. I mean, you could, but then you get a reputation. So I know you're not in the kitchen as much, but how do you adjust your coaching style?
Here's the thing. Listen, because I'm a little older, I'm more mature, and I also see when you're a chef working 90 hours a week in the kitchen, you think you're the only one working sometimes. Yeah. You have complete disregard for the runner, the busboy, and the waiter, and usually the managers work last, and the bartenders show up late, so you get a little bit of a chip on your shoulder, and you get angry, and you're working in the same hot environment. As you get to become an entrepreneur and an owner, you start to see the other side of it too and realize everybody's a spoke in the wheel and everybody made their choice to do what they're supposed to do, and you respect them for it. Now, sometimes I have chefs that work for me and I see them getting sucked into that, victimhood of I'm the guy working the hardest and this and that. You got to take them out for a walk and give the pep talk as, listen, this is what we do as artists, and you are the heartbeat of the restaurant. Now, and then the other part of if you're yelling means you hired the wrong people. I mean, there's going to be a bad night. You got to get a little hot under the collar here and there. But if you're consistently yelling at the same person over the same thing, you're a bad manager. That means you didn't, and if you don't hire, if your GM is not to be trusted, you got to hire right. And it's not easy. There's always going to be stuff. Listen, I'm having we have meetings. This is not a business where you set up a system and you walk away. Yeah. This is a live, living, breathing, adapting. Look what just happened to COVID. Look at how we had to pivot. And you know what? And we're resilient. And most of us are psycho enough that we're like into it. Like, yeah, I'm going to
Yeah.
This is the next challenge I'm going to beat.
Bring another pandemic at me, I can hack it, you know?
Right.
I feel that same. I feel that same draw. I wasn't in restaurants for a few months, and after the pandemic happened, a friend of mine asked me to join the team again, and I jumped at the chance because I wanted to see, is it possible? Like, how can we do this? With some of your restaurants being at 25% capacity, I think you mentioned that earlier. Is the juice even worth the squeeze for some of these places? And if not, why are you trying to stay open?
It's a great New York City. We're not even at 25%. I was doing outdoor dining. I have a platform called Feed the Heroes. We raise money, blah, 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 blah. We fed hospitals, 1,000 meals a day. I closed it down recently, David Burke Tavern, because I can't make money on a sidewalk when minimum wage is $15 an hour and waiters are making 12. So we're closed. De Blasio, the mayor, it doesn't want to open restaurants in New York City for who knows why until January. New Jersey, fortunately, I have 5 places. They all have ample outdoor seating, and we've had the best weather this summer that I can ever imagine. Yeah. So we've been blessed with that from my other restaurateurs and colleagues of mine in Jersey that are in downtown areas without the right amount of seating aren't as fortunate, and it's terrible. And in New York, we're sidelined. But Jersey's been good. Charlotte, like I said, we were able to open up top. Well, we're not profitable, but the gears are starting to get oiled up, and we're going to be able to open during this softer area now. New Jersey, Friday gets 25% in. But luckily, we'll still have a month, 5 weeks of warm weather outside. 25% only indoors is never going to cut it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Unless you have really big places, and people will start to come out at 4:00 knowing and that did happen at one point where people would dine a little earlier. So, you got to cut payroll, your landlord, everything's about math.
Yeah.
Is this one going to take a pay cut? Is your landlord going to be friendly? Is your food costs going to remain? But at 25% capacity, nobody signed up for that.
Yeah.
But hopefully we'll get to 50% by October, at least 50, and maybe by November we'll be up to 75 and Christmas. Again, I think after the election, this virus is going to be mysteriously not that important anymore.
I share your same sentiment. About that.
I do, and I think also the people that are really good at the math and really good at restaurants, they're still finding ways to at least keep the doors open.
It's yes, and then it's fatiguing, and it's you dig deeper and deeper and deeper, and you know what? We're like Marines in white coats, man. We're like we don't not give up. It's like
it is. Go. It's the resiliency of the restaurant, and you certainly have been.
Failure's not an option. I mean, what else are you going to do?
Right. I do want to just touch one step back on what we were talking about the culture of restaurants and stuff like that, and specifically with chefs and stuff. We talked about it a lot on the show that it used to be, I worked 90 hours a week. That's a reason to puff your chest out in a macho pride stamp. But nowadays, and maybe it's more my perspective has switched because I'm not in New York anymore for 4.5 years. But is that something as now a corporate culture restaurateur that you are finding ways to have that more life balance for chefs as well?
Listen, that's been talked about for 2 or 3 decades now. The sad reality of it is the turnover is so high, the salaried people always get sucked in the long weeks, right? I mean, we don't offer 401ks and pension plans and retirement plans. There's no corporate ladder in in the normal restaurant business. So, and you got transient people with lack of education. No one's signing up to be with you for a 10-year plan. You know what I mean? So the restaurant business differs from a corporate tech company in many ways. And when you have turnover, that means someone else has to show up because the show must go on. So there's always going to be that, I want everyone to work 55 hours a week, have 2 days a week off and do that. Does it happen? Sometimes, yes. Does it happen? Always no. And then you open a new place and the show goes on. So that's the life we choose. Now, and the real problem in the restaurant business is when it's busy, you got to work hard. But when it's slow, you got to work harder. Because you got to make your numbers.
Yeah, you got to figure out a way.
But you send home the hourly employees and the salaried people have to work. So it's and the other thing in regard to the celebrity chef phrase and the celebrity part of it, and the fact there's so many pitfalls in the restaurant business with the late hours, the alcohol, the drugs, the Me Too stuff that all gets intertwined together, is that there's never a break. if you're a celebrity in the sports world, in the movie world, or anything else, you have an off season, and you have a in between movies or in between gigs. In the restaurant business, there's no in between gigs, and there's holidays on top of weekends and on top of, so the burnout factor is very high, and that's something that has been different in regard to the newer people, the younger students that are coming in. And back to the question about, in the old days, the yelling at people and the working, and it was a blue collar profession. It was a blue collar. You didn't see white collar kids cooking in restaurants, and now you do.
Yeah.
Now it's become a respected profession. So when you have somebody's son that goes to the CIA or to Cornell, and then they come to you, and their father's a lawyer or mother's a lawyer, and you yell at them, and they go home and say, "You guy yelled at me, call me a name." All of a sudden, you got a lawsuit.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, what is that about? I mean, or he made me, I had to stand up for 12 hours on a Sunday.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that's part of your job.
I do feel like the pendulum is going to swing back and forth a little bit, because there's also probably, and I'm just speaking on my own accord, I think there's even a part about young chefs that don't mind getting yelled at, that don't mind the tough love, that kind of want somebody to like give it to them straight. Like if everyone's just like, yeah, that dish is pretty good. I mean, it might not work right now.
I agree with you 120%. Some people react better to the attention they're getting by somebody being passionate about correcting them.
Yeah, tough love is still love.
One of those times, because when you might get a little bit of like, oh my goodness, and then you come back and say, okay, I learned something.
Yeah,
that was good. Now I'll never make that mistake. As opposed to, you're 100% right.
We can't get out of here without talking about Lefto. What is going on here?
Oh man, he's in the car.
Lefto, Chef David Burke, sous chef, who eats all the leftovers. Please let us know what is going on with Lefto.
You want to see him?
Sure, yeah. Do you literally have him in the car?
Yeah.
It's like the Howard Stern, one of the Howard Stern puppets.
He's got a girlfriend now.
So,
wow,
got a girlfriend. So, please paint the picture since we're just audio.
Here's what I had a few puppets years ago. I was going to take ventriloquist classes just so I could curse on people on the subway with my puppet.
So
I had these puppets in my house. I started dating a girl. She bought me a chef puppet, miniature version of me, 3 years ago, and it was sitting in my house. And then during the pandemic, I'm home alone, and I'm like, I'm going to start cooking. And I had people sending me oysters and stuff to my house to start videotaping. And Lefto became my sidekick, and he was my left-hand man. And I had this thing in my head to do a show for a long time, and that's why I already had the name. And he was going to create dishes with leftovers, and he was going to be that wise-ass sous chef asking questions or berating people that I can't do because of who I am now. So we started
a good show.
We started it and became an Instagram hit, and now we're working. Lefto's actually making some money. Lefto gets paid sometimes to go on virtual cooking classes and things like that.
He needs an agent and everything.
Well, he's got He's got
a website. He's got an Instagram handle.
So it's been great because honestly, it was at the beginning when the fear set in of the pandemic, before we got our PPP money, and there was uncertainty, and you couldn't buy toilet paper. Remember that? And you couldn't. Everything was like, everyone was like stocking up their freezers. I started cooking with him and creating a sense of hope and sharing and putting on some rock and roll. And really, you know what? I got back in touch with food, and it was great. And but now we continue. Here he is.
We get to see Lefto.
Oh, here is Lefto. For the listeners, we'll have to put
What's
this
going
on social.
Lefto?
And he was making out with his. He met a girl on Muppet Tinder.
Minder, yeah.
What's up, hey guys?
This is hilarious.
Nice.
Yeah, everybody's gonna have to go to our social media to see. I'm gonna snap a picture right here. Give us a big smile there, Lefto.
What is it? LeftoByDB.com. LeftoTimesDB.com. Or Chef David Burke. What? LeftoByDB.com.
We'll put the links on our show notes for sure.
New stuff. He's working on a book too.
Nice.
And he wants business cards and he wants a raise.
Lefto, what's your signature dish?
Paella.
Paella?
Paella.
Nice. That sounds awesome right now.
I said playa twice.
Well, before we get out of here,
He's got lipstick on his lip too. The guy, he's a boner.
Yeah. Let's hope that wasn't on the clock.
But we're gonna get him down to Charlotte. We'll do something together.
That's hilarious.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, when you get down here, if you come up to the Triangle, one more.
Never been. I've never been. I'd love to get up there.
Well, we'll have to take you on a little tour. If you ever want to know or see anything about about the Triangle area, you really couldn't find two better guys to show you around, because we pretty much met and spoke with everybody in this area. But I am speaking about one of our final sponsors we'll get into before we get out of here. That's the Triangle Wine Company. And so while you're stocking your fridge for the quarantine, or for maybe you just get out into the park like David and Lefto are doing out there somewhere out in the park, and you want to get a little rosé, you go to trianglewineco.com. They have 4 locations, Holly Springs, Morrisville, Cary, and Southern Pines, and apparently a new one coming out soon up there in the Wake Forest area. And while you were there, you can also get something maybe a little sweet, maybe a little boozy.
Yeah, Chef, when you're over here, down here, we'll hook you up with some proof alcohol ice cream. So these great people in South Carolina have found, much like you found your patent on your Himalayan sea salt aging, they've found a way to make wonderful ice cream on its own, but infuse alcohol in it, and it still maintains this unbelievable texture. It's 7% alcohol. They have great flavors like bourbon caramel, apple pie moonshine, cheesecake moonshine. Yeah, it makes you think differently about dessert, and you can get ice cream and your booze all in one. So proof alcohol ice cream, you can get it at the Triangle Wine Company. So good friends of ours, synergy there. But also it's available, if you don't have a Triangle Wine Company near you, at Harris Teeter or Lowe's. Look for that little red signature freezer they have, and you'll find it in the beer and wine section.
Well, Chef, we really appreciate you being on the show. You've got a lot going on. I mean, just you and Lefto alone, that's the whole day right there. But with the 17 restaurants you've got opening, trying to reopen some of them, working it all out, we very much appreciate the time that you've given us for the podcast. Matt, you got anything else to say to Chef before we get out of here?
Chef, really appreciate your time. I really appreciate your perspective on 40 years in this industry and really seeing the ups and downs and peaks and valleys of this business to share your insights with us. It's really appreciated. So when you're out in Charlotte, go to on the top of that Cloud Bar in Le Meridien and go to Red Salt by David Burke. You will eat and drink very merrily.
Thanks for listening to the NC F&B podcast. And if you've stuck with us this long, review us on iTunes, and remember, 5 stars are encouraged.